less than 10 minutes. This is really exciting stuff. So as one of the organisers of 2 AM, I get to do this rather cool thing of when I see someone speaking at another conference and I think they're really interesting, I get to invite them to come to another conference. And I saw David speaking on some of the work he's been doing in supporting communicating open science in his institution in Brunel. And he's going to be giving a talk on a similar subject today for us. David, thanks very much. You have 10 minutes. I have post-it notes.
I'll just turn it on first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's the one. Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm David Walters, and I work for Brunel University London. My presentation today is titled Institutional Services and Altmetrics as Drivers for a Cultural Transition to Open Scholarship. I'm going to talk about the services being developed by institutions to foster a cultural change in our local communities. I'm going to talk about new services that we believe are required in order to swiftly bring about this transition. In the first section, I'll begin by discussing institutional services as drivers for open scholarship. I'll talk about the development of services at Brunel geared toward affecting cultural change in our local community. And next, I'll talk about the evolution of our systems deployment that's facilitating this transition. And finally, I'll discuss how our services are being built around effective data management techniques in order to empower our role as advocates for change. In the second part, I'll talk about how social media and Altmetrics are rising to prominence in the kind of services we're delivering, and I'll talk about our aspirations for future services within this context. There's been an explosion of institutional services at UK universities in support of researchers and open access, and a somewhat popular phrase for us has been the idea of a post-Finch world, referring to a report advocating a gold-led approach to open access in the UK. And some key milestones for us have been the implementation of the Ask UK and COAF open access policies, and also the HEFCE policy, which mandates green open access for research assessment. And what this has done is prompted the implementation of support services at UK universities. For example, here at Brunel, we have a dedicated centralised support team. So we're now in a position to serve our academics across a number of different research support areas. Effectively, we're kind of like a frontline service, really helping our authors deal with a transition to a new models of publishing and the scholarly model. But as you can see from the list, only one of those is open access, and that's what I'll focus on here today. So, for open access, some key milestones for us have been the early adoption of an institutional repository some years ago, setting up a fund for gold open access for all our authors since 2008, the implementation of a CRIS system back in 2010, and the ongoing administration of the Ask UK block grant, which first came to us in 2013. So fundamentally, our role has been to lead our community as advocates through a culture change. And Open Access Week is a great example of this advocacy role in action. But this kind of one-to-one advocacy work should happen far more regularly than it does. Our services exist to foster engagement with our communities, and they work to engender open dissemination practice as the established norm. We're also facilitators of open access, serving those necessary aspects of administration, making reports and recording payments, for example. As facilitators are tasks are broadly split between reporting requirements to stakeholders and request-driven processes. And a challenge for us has been to minimise the impact of these processes, especially when staff resources are low. So, in delivering this transition, both roles are necessary, but facilitation has, up to a point, been the dominant activity in our service delivery. And being overburdened with administrative tasks has suffocated our role as leaders and advocates. And only advocacy is going to bring about the true cultural change we all wish to see. And what's still required is the systems in place to rebalance these roles for support staff, and more importantly, to remove the burden from academics so that time that could be spent on research is not unfairly taken away. The implementation of a CRIS system has been vital for the development of our research support services, and at Brunel we use symplectic elements. CRIS stands for Current Research Information System. It's essentially a database used by institutions to monitor academic output alongside local business systems. And you can see the diagram on the right, if you've got very good eyesight. Gives a simplistic overview of the architecture employed by the system on a local level. And as you can see, all the feeds drawn by the system touch all areas of the organisation, but primarily this database monitors research outputs and associated research activity. Other key functionality is the way it brings data in from outside sources. ORCID, bibliographic databases, and Altmetrics, for example. It connects with our IR and our FigShare Data Repository, acting as a registry for all research activity at the institution. And it's already had a number of business applications. It helped us to do our ref submission back in 2014, and it also powers a number of our web pages as well. However, this system was not designed with our developing research support services in mind, and notably for us, some key community-driven data resources seem to be missing. For example, CORE, the repository aggregator, and Open Article Gauge, the automated license checker. So in the next stage of our evolution, this is where our service development stepped in. We came to realise there was a need to build additional processes on top of a CRIS architecture to support our service requirements specific to the needs of our community. So we implemented a CRIS-led data management approach to support the facilitation aspect of our services. We wanted to manage our data more effectively by making best use of these existing data sources. We did this because we wanted to curtail administration time and give scalability to this aspect of our service requirements. We wanted to simplify the administration process and achieve a greater level of understanding of our publications data over different dimensions, particularly, of course, in the area of open access dissemination. So our first approach was to try and apply some of these missing data sources to our institutional record. And this gave our data the required depth to monitor dissemination trends over the university's portfolio. And this in turn informed our own service response in real time, enabling evidence-based conversations with specific departments and a means for targeting our own limited human resources more effectively. So we also created a small database to structure funding and information requests into a coherent shared workflow. And again, this is a demonstration of new services being built around a CRIS framework in order to better serve the needs of our academics. The point is service building, which is something the library is very experienced in and has come to do very well. We're also proactively identifying papers that are under an open access mandate from the acknowledgement statements found in the Scopus and Web of Science databases. And this collation of techniques has enabled a greater understanding of the needs of our authors, thanks to our ability to analyse their publishing habits and our ability to identify trends in this area for the institution. And this is an example of some of our results. So you can see a breakdown of open access dissemination trends across the university's portfolio. And thanks to the architecture employed by the CRIS, we can direct this approach towards specific departments or research groups within our community. It's also allowed us to develop mechanisms for effectively managing complex financial processes. And we're also helping to improve the array of new data services that are emerging to support the transition to open access. So, for example, we're now working with the Open Article Gauge chaps, the automated license checking tool, to improve the performance of the tool against the publication platforms chosen by Brunel academics. Moving into the next section, I'll just touch on the clear mutualistic relationship that exists between alternative metrics and the transition to open scholarship. It's true to say that a link to a publication is more likely to be shared if it resolves to a resource and not a paywall. And open access brings scholarly research in line with expected usability habits of web content. And at the risk of appearing to ingratiate myself to the organisers, this is some research taken from the Altmetrics blog. As you can see here, essentially open access equals more uniques on Twitter when a paper is shared. So in effect, this is something that academics really do need to know more about, and somewhere where institutional services may yet play a role in supporting this. Dealing with researchers on a daily basis, we're well positioned to comment on the divide that exists between those who are engaged with social media as part of the dissemination process and with those who aren't. So there are a number of great tools already out there that assist with this process. However, success is largely dependent on researchers actively building their own digital networks. Obviously, you can't exploit a network to disseminate your research if one doesn't exist. Melissa Terras is an academic from UCL, and she's done a great job in documenting her experiences in this area. She's shown how academics can reap huge rewards from this process, but also illustrated the effort required in building an online persona. The university and library service in particular are becoming quite experienced at engaging communities through social media. And you can see from the slide, examples include our research blog and Vine channel that we're working to develop, and we're not alone in some of these initiatives. But what about university services moving toward developing social channels around research themes? Records metadata in the CRIS is curated to a very high standard. It's also possible to build research themes around this data, as was done for the ref. So why can't staff use this to form part of an engagement platform? However these services develop, it's clear that we can play a role here, promoting research alongside our institutional affiliation and possibly helping our research to achieve a greater level of impact. To close, institutional services play a vital role in affecting the transition toward open scholarship and open science. And related to Altmetrics, institutional services can play a much better supporting role for researchers in the social dissemination of their outputs. And that's the end. Thank you very much.